This week on the Destination Angler.
And so this Navajo woman come by, and she had all these signs for sale. And one of the signs said, "You here again? Another half-hour shot." And so I pasted that. Pasted that up to the fly tying desk, and that took care of a couple guys.
That's funny.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. Don't leave home without it. I'd sure appreciate it if you'd take a minute and check out these great sponsors. You can join in the conversation by heading over to our Instagram and Facebook pages where we post pictures of the destinations we cover and top fly picks from our experts. And this week, my most recent trip to the beautiful Upper Gallatin River in Yellowstone National Park and Henry's Fork in eastern Idaho. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to the world-famous McCloud River in Northern California. From there, we head on over to the great state of Washington for a tour of the Chama River. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on the Upper Delaware River with longtime guide Bruce Miller with the Delaware River Club. Just a few hours from New York City, the Upper Delaware is considered one of the best technical dry fly fisheries in the country. Bruce untangles the hatch chart and gives us the lowdown on the east, west, and the main branches. You won't want to miss these shows. And today our destination is the Rio Chama in northern New Mexico. And my guest is author and expert fly angler, guide, and fly shop owner Taylor Streit with Taos Fly Shop. The variety of the fly fishing opportunities in northern New Mexico is incredible. From secluded timberline streams to farmland rivers to world-class tailwaters, anglers can pretty much choose their own adventure. Rivers like the Conejos, the San Juan, the Rio Grande, and the Chama are all world-class fisheries. Wild and remote, the Chama is far from towns, and much of it flows through roadless areas. It's a great summer hike-in fishery with freestone and tailwater sections where anglers can get away from the crowds and tangle with large trout. Taylor grew up in the Catskills and moved to northern New Mexico in the late 1960s, where he lived on a commune and later opened Taos Fly Shop. He is the author of 5 books, including Instinctive Fly Fishing, Man vs. Fish, and his latest guidebook, Fly Fish Taos Santa Fe, which is excellent. In 2001, he was unanimously inducted into the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame as a legendary guide. So hang on to your hat as we hear tales of commune living in the 1960s, eating jackrabbits, the last grizzly bear, tame elk, getting lost, catching old Walter, the 26-inch brown trout, and Taos Pueblo and the northern New Mexico vibe. And be sure to stick around to the very end to hear Taylor's tips on simplifying fly fishing and, of course, fishing naked.
Well, Taylor, welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve.
Super excited to have you. Man, we've got a lot to talk about. Not only this hidden gem of a river, but, you being an author, you've written a lot about your many adventures in your life. It's hard to know even where to begin. So I guess I'm super curious about the commune thing in the 1960s. That was kind of a thing back then, wasn't it?
Well, it was, it's a guy like me, I would be called homeless, I think now, but it was, it had a different title back then.
Okay.
So, commune was a perfect place to land.
There you go. Were you living off the land with a group of people?
Well, we came somewhat close to that, I must say. I killed a lot of rabbits, a lot of jackrabbits, and caught a lot of fish. It was before catch and releases. Back when the limit in New Mexico was 16 trout, and we ate many a 16 trout dinner, I guarantee you. Yeah.
How's that jackrabbit taste?
Well, it's really for enchiladas. You want to have, cottontails is a good rabbit, but and then small ones at that. But jackrabbit's fine. It's my daughter-in-law, Chrissy. She thinks it's quite marvelous, actually.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, how about that? I was thinking about, this part of the world, like northern New Mexico, right? And if I were to, stop 3 to 4 anglers on the street and say, "Hey, what are your top 3 to 4 fly fishing destinations?" I don't know if northern New Mexico would come up, but it should. I mean, there is so much to fish in northern Mexico. I wonder, why do you suppose maybe it's not on the top of some people's list like it should be?
Well, yeah, and you even said northern Mexico.
New
But not
Mexico.
let's forget that it's
Yeah.
that's good. You're on the right side there, keeping things quiet. But I mean, I've been in the fishing business a long time, a lot of it out of the country, and so it's all about populations, and Albuquerque is 150 miles away, and that's kind of a big deal on the weekend. But most of the people that come and fish from Texas and well, who knows where, Taos and Santa Fe are famous destinations, so people come from everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a whole lot of fishing, and the reason I named the new book Fly Fish Taos Santa Fe is basically I just fessed up in the intro, and I said, well, we've used all the other titles, and I used 2 of them myself, and so I figured I'd put in where the fisherman's going to be fishing out of, because really that's where we fish out of, because we've got the 2 fly shops, Taos Fly Shop and the Real Life in Santa Fe.
Okay, I got you. So, what in your mind, what is it about this part of the world, northern New Mexico, that really makes it so special for the fly angler?
There is kind of an incredible variety of fishing in the year-round season. I mean, now that we have this monster climate change thing, it's extended the trout fishing season. I mean, we're we're giving up a lot for that, but with the different elevations, because the lowest part of the Rio Grande we fished is probably 5,000 feet.
Yeah.
But there's also places to fish at timberlines, and that's what 11,000, 12,000 feet. And so, when you have that kind of variety of elevations, you can usually choose a place that's prime for the season.
Right. So a lot to choose from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some of them, like, from most of our guiding, I know close to it is on the Rio Grande. And the Rio Grande is in a 60-mile long canyon. And about 90% of the canyon is accessible by foot. And it's in between cliffs. And so it's just for some, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
We do some float trips in a couple of very specific spots. One of them's a camp float. But so the Rio has a miles and miles and miles of very lightly fished water. I mean, I'm really too old to fish a lot of it now myself, so a lot of it's for vigorous people.
The younger guys. Okay.
Yeah,
and
right.
What else? So what else is there? I mean, you've got the Conejos, you've got the San Juan. What else is there up there?
Well, from Taos, the Conejos is about an hour and 20 minutes. And the San Juan, well, and then Chama. I should mention Chama because I think that's our topic we spoke of. And the Chama is an hour and 40 minutes, because I've driven it 1,000 times, west of Taos. And it is another outpost. It's 1,000 people, and it's got a bunch of motels, and it's got a tourist train, but it's got a lot of water. There's the Chama River, and then over the hill, half an hour, is the Conejos in Colorado. And then there's the Los Pinos in New Mexico, and then there is the Hickory Apache Reservation, which has a bunch of lakes, and the San Juan is about an hour and a half west of Chama.
Okay.
And the Chama has a bunch of different sections, and so.
Well, let's save the Chama for later. But could you tell us about like the San Juan and the Conejos? Those two rivers are super interesting.
Right. Well, the Conejos is great dry fly river, and I mean great. The fish are large. They probably average 17 inches, and they look up. I mean, it's a relatively shallow, pretty large river for our territory. I mean, it's not the Madison, but it's about half the size of the Madison, probably. I'd say. And it has really fabulous hatches, and it's a summer fishery, a spring and summer. So it doesn't have the wide expanse of options that like the Rio Grande does, which can fish in the middle of winter. But the Conejos really has some super fishing in season. You know, it's got a lot of. I mean, because it's intermountain. It's in the San Juans. It gets cold. So
high country.
So it freezes actually. Yeah, it's high country, and it has a lot of feeders that are in the Rio Grande National Forest of Colorado. It has a lot of feeder streams that are very good. I mean, that's all hiking stuff, but there's a couple roads, but it's mostly. And then up, it comes out. It's a tailwater, but it also kind of fishes like a regular freestone, but it does have, as one would expect, it has a whole lot more trout closer to the dam, which is Potoro Reservoir. And above Potoro Reservoir is really some fabulous fishing. There's 3 forks of the river, the middle fork, the Adams Fork, and I guess it's the Conejos itself, the main stem, but that's real high elevation. It's a lot of walking. And I think it's got, in that little area there, it's got 4 species. So.
Okay. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really nice river.
Yeah. No, the Conejos is something else. And fishing pressure is a big factor, and it's even a bigger factor when you have large fish like there, because they're the smart ones. And so, and it gets a moderate amount of pressure. I mean, for a Colorado river, it's moderate, not like, something like the Gunnison or is heavy, I'd say. But it does show signs. I mean, a fish comes up and looks at you dry and turns around. It's been caught recently. So so it's good to fish the Conejos early in the season,
Okay, when you say early, what's early? June, yeah. Okay, gotcha. And at that high country, you might need to keep track of runoff.
Summer.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still snowbanks up there now.
Yeah, right. And what about the San Juan? That's a pretty darn famous river, big tailwater, right?
Yeah, I worked in Argentina, ran operations there for a long time, and everybody in Argentina would ask about the San Juan.
Oh, is that right?
All the fishermen. Huh. Yeah, it was a big deal. And the San Juan has changed. I fished the San Juan 50 years ago, and the first time I ever went there was just like when there was a rumor of it being, this incredible fishery. And I pulled up to it and I looked up and down river a mile each direction, and there was nobody else there. And I'm like, no, there's no trout here. There'd be somebody fishing. And I went out and I caught a 19-inch rainbow that was like 4 pounds. It was this big around as a football, And so, it's gone through a lot of phases. The food has changed over the years, so the fish do different things, and other different fish prosper. Now it's more of a brown trout stream than it used to be, and brown trout are becoming the predominant, and they're wild. The rainbows are actually stocked. They're stocked small.
Okay.
And one of my guides, Ron Sadal, he float fishes the San Juan a lot. We have a couple of permits for there, and he has some wild rig that he uses that I wouldn't even bear to discuss. It's a secret thing that
Oh man.
that he hooks. I mean, it don't happen a lot, but it happens enough that it's worth doing. And he has clients catch 30-inch fish. I mean, maybe just a couple a year, you know,
Yeah.
but he's got the
They're
photos
in
to
there.
prove it. And so, yeah, they're big cannibal fish. They're eating 12 inchers now. So, which is something we were used to in Argentina, but that's another place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the San Juan, I mean, it doesn't have as many fish as it used to, but it's still San Juan. It's still incredible fishing. You know, you can get out of your car and you walk 50 feet, and you're looking at 50, 18-inch trout rising. You know,
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
maybe 10 or 20 years ago, would have been 100 trout rising, but it's something. It's quite a sight.
Okay. It gets a little crowded, but can you deal with the crowds?
It gets real crowded, and it's wise to think about that. Or, you know, to fish the San Juan without a guide, even for an extremely experienced fisherman, is a bad idea. To fish it with a guide, and often, you know, a lot of trips that we do out of the fly shops are when a guy's going to be fishing longer, and you know, and that's the deal. Yeah, we'll take you out for a day or two, and then you're on your own, and we'll line you out, you know. So, but the San Juan is a hard nut to crack, you know, fishing with size 26 flies and 7X tippet is not.
Okay, I got you.
Very few people have done that.
I don't know about you. I need a guide just to tie something on a size 26 hook. Yeah, I would struggle with that.
Yeah.
You know, I've got my flip down, you know, whatever those things are. They're not binoculars, you know, magnifiers.
Yeah,
and I've got my glasses. It's like, anyway.
Yeah. No, I use binoculars myself.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny.
No.
Hey anglers, are you looking for a darn near perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Then do yourself a favor and check out anglerscoffee.com. That's right, Anglers Coffee is made by anglers for anglers, delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. They start with the very best coffee beans selected for their great flavor and responsible growing methods. Then each batch is roasted fresh daily. The result is a wide selection of roast styles that will satisfy the most discerning coffee lover. And now you can enjoy Angler's Coffee anywhere, anytime with the Dry Dropper single-serving coffee in a tea bag. Just add water. And this isn't your mother's instant coffee. It's a single serving of carefully dark-roasted, fresh ground and nitro-sealed coffee. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com to check out their great selection of coffee and the organizations they support. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's Angler's Coffee. It's darn near perfect.
Taylor, how big is a San Juan? Like how far across is it? CFS? What is that?
CFS is normally around 500.
Okay.
It's a big river, and it's kind of a lot of flat water, fairly flat water, but riffles too.
Yeah.
And if a guy is going there without a guide, he go through the riffles. You know, you always want to fish the fast water if you not knowing what to do. You know,
right.
You can get by with more in fast water, but it'll go up to 2,000 or 3,000 sometimes. But it seldom goes much below 500.
Okay. Sounds like is it wadeable then? When you say you can come back and fish on your own, you're talking about
wade
fishermen?
It is wadeable, but you know, you can only cross it in two or three places.
You gotta be careful though.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, no, and it's actually it's a good question because it's tricky. It has a lot of what do you call it, slate rock, and
Okay.
it's easy to slide on. That you
All right.
really want cleats, you really want nails on the bottom of your shoes on
Right.
that one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the other thing I
Right.
want to ask you about, we're talking about the broader area, is just the history of this area. My wife and I went down to Taos and Santa Fe a couple of years ago, and I'd never been there before. It's such a neat area, just from a historical standpoint, and just the culture down there. The food is different than anything I've had anywhere else in the country. And we got there. We went to Taos Pueblo on St. Geronimo Day, and we watched, the Pueblo Indians climbing this pole and chopping something down off the pole, and running around. It was super interesting.
Yeah, September 30th, I think is the day.
Is that it? Okay.
And yeah, and that's one of the tourist things that even local people go to.
Huh.
And there's a lot of jewelry sold, and then they have did you see the clowns? And then the clowns will take kids and throw them in the river. And,
kids were scared.
And then
those kids were scared of
them. And then they put up a huge greased pole, about like the biggest telephone pole you've ever seen in your life.
75 feet.
And yeah. And then the young guys compete in who can climb it, and it's like. And then they get to the top, and whoever gets to the top gets to whoop it up, and it's quite a show. Yeah,
I was standing there talking to a guy who was a Navajo Indian, and he was making arrows for people. So I was watching him make this arrow that I was going to buy from him. And I said, "So what is that bag up there? It's the top of the pole." And he says, "Oh, it's a big bag of cigarettes." And apparently they chop the rope, and the bag drops, and the bag busts open, and everybody dives and tries to. I didn't see that happen. I don't know if that's true, but that's what the guy told me. So
yeah, I know there's something up there, but I'm
not sure if it's cigarettes.
If that's it or not.
Well, it used to be a goat,
maybe.
I think they said. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's supposed to be a sheep.
A sheep.
That's
okay.
what I've seen. Now that you mention that, I've seen a sheep hanging up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But is the oldest continuously inhabited building in North America is in Taos Pueblo? They told me 1,000 years
1,100 years old.
1,100.
So really, yeah, one of the great spectacles to see in New Mexico is, of course, Chaco Canyon, and that's where everyone surmises that the inhabitants of the pueblos, because you see, there's pueblos all up and down the Rio Grande. And they kind of a little bit below Albuquerque, and to Taos Pueblo, there's like 15 different pueblos, and they came from Chaco Canyon when Chaco Canyon crashed, and which was about, I don't know, 1,000 years ago. So
okay,
no, the history is pretty amazing, and one great book to read is the Kit Carson book. Which I can't remember the name. By Sides is his name. The one who wrote it. His name is Sides.
Yeah,
and
I read that.
Yeah, and because it was the center of the trapping industry for a long time, but the center of a lot more. It was the center of the slave trade and a lot of stuff. And then Taos and then the Pueblo would have a fair every year. And all of the different, this is before, before Europeans arrived, which was very early, 1500, 14 something, when the Spanish first arrived. And so they would have a trade fair, and all the different tribes would arrive, and then the wild Comanches would come, and nobody knew what the Comanches were going to do. They were going to steal people, or they were going to be nice that weekend, or, So, the history is quite profound.
That is just so interesting. And I was reading one of your books about you were talking about how there's been a lot of grazing from the 1800s, and you can still see the damage from that. I was wondering what that was all about.
Well, I have a friend who writes on the subject, and he says, well, we don't know what it was like before the Spanish arrived. I mean, it's very likely. I mean, from what I hear, we ate up the mastodons. You know, so
Yeah. Who knows?
so people had a big impact on you know, and the Spanish brought pigs to Florida, and then apparently they spread out all over the United States within not that long, and so yeah, we made quite an impression.
Yeah, right.
And you know, I should say, since we're talking about the area, and it's this time of year, we just had this monstrous fire thing, and we had a couple of very big fires, 300 and some thousand, and there was one that's in northern New Mexico, but amazingly, it didn't touch any of the Rio. One little stream on the southern edge of the Pueblo River burned, but all of the rest of everything that burned is in the. It's not even the Pecos drainage. It's drainages that run. Well, they end up in the Mississippi. It's just, you know,
It's
off
east of
into the
you.
plains.
Yeah, it's all east of you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. It's over the mountains, over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So, and the forest is open again. The Carson National Forest was closed, and it's open now.
That's good to hear. Yeah, what a relief.
And
Well,
the
that had
fire-
to be scary. That's the biggest wildfire in New Mexico history. Is that right?
Right. And then the other one, which is actually where I live now, which is in southern New Mexico, was just a tiny bit smaller than that. Yeah. And we had a huge rain, and so in the creek right by my house, there's some of that black water that came down from the fire, and that's not good stuff.
No.
So yeah, but our whole trout fishing area was spared. Just amazing.
That's
We've been
great.
quite lucky.
Yeah, good to hear that.
Yeah. The nature of those rivers is not too prone to burn, because the Rio Grande runs through 75 miles of desert pretty much, and so there's nothing to burn. And
Yeah.
the Chama comes out of real high country, like aspen forests, which really don't burn. And then it runs kind of through deserty sort of country. And
Okay.
so we haven't had fires in that stuff.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
I can't remember how long. Yeah.
If you've ever looked for a good map to help you with anything from public access to finding the best trout streams in a given area, I highly recommend checking out this new app called Trout Routes. Just this spring, I was in the driftless region of Wisconsin, and man, was it awesome to have the Trout Routes app on my phone to help us do some exploring. Trout Routes made it so easy to find new water and access points that we never would have found without it. Trout Routes has mapped out every trout stream by state with very detailed access maps for every stream. They have over 15 different map layers with hundreds of thousands of access points. They also have local fly shops, the ability to take notes, and even local stream regulations, and you can download maps for offline use. Today, Trout Routes covers 23,000 trout streams in 23 states, including Montana, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Wyoming, Missouri, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and more. And they're adding 10 more states this year, including Utah and New York. So if you have an upcoming trip or are looking to explore nearby streams, I suggest you check out Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Don't leave home without it.
So the Rio Chama starts in the San Juans, which is in southwest Colorado, I believe, right? Can you tell us more about kind of you describe the character of the water from the top to the bottom? I know it's high country where it starts, and then
Right. I have a book called Man versus Fish, and I have a story about catching old Walter, we called him, and fished for him for 2 years, and it was a 26 3/4 inch male brown. And
nice.
It lived in a beaver pond. At 10,000 feet, and which is
exciting.
If you know about the longevity of trout and the situation of the altitude, it's quite amazing that it got to be that big at that
Yeah.
in that cold country, right? Because but
Right.
it was there was a spring right there. It came a spring fed this huge beaver pond, and there was that one trout living in there.
No kidding.
And,
How big?
We couldn't. All there was 26 3/4.
How old do you think that thing was?
Well, I've read that they can get 20 years browns, and rainbow's only like 8 or 10. So who knows? I'm sure it might have been that one. But at any rate, I interrupted myself. So that was the beaver pond that was off of the main channel. And, you know, in the San Juans, in that wonderful group of mountain range that actually descends into New Mexico, but it's very lightly frequented. It doesn't have any 14,000 peaks to attract people. Mm-hmm. It's really far from population cities. And so you can find a little creek and you might see a beaver stick and it, you know, that's been chewed, and then you go up it and you might find a beaver pond that ain't been fished in how long, you know.
Yeah.
So it's some real high mountain country there, and that upper river is a very good summer fishery. And I would say it's about mid-July is probably prime, mid-July to the 1st of September. But especially that first part, because there's a big stonefly hatch of golden stones in the river, and it's small there. It's only like 30 feet across, I'd say.
Okay.
But the average fish is about 15 inches, and there's 20 inches in there.
That's awesome.
Caught a 24 in there once. But so it comes down. It goes through a bunch of private property, which is, well, maybe we should mention that, but that's another thing. We'll stick with the geography, because it comes down, crosses into New Mexico, and then it goes into this area called the Sargent Wildlife Area, which is very rugged, but you can hike in and out of it. Yeah. And then it runs into the farm country, which is probably, well, I wouldn't say the most productive, maybe the most productive of the river. And but unfortunately, a lot of it gets siphoned out for irrigation, of course, through there.
Sure.
And then it flows into El Vado Reservoir, which is being worked on now. And when it's finished, they're doing something where they're going to make it so that the river below El Vado, which is a 25-mile stretch to the next reservoir, which is Abiquiu, but it's going to have some hardware in it that is going to allow the water to be taken out at different levels on the dam. Okay. So that the silt doesn't pass through necessarily, is the way wonderful. I understand it. This hasn't happened yet, but that is what they're doing now, because the water below there is just excellent. I mean, it's very often dirty, but it's got a lot of big trout, and the state record brown, a 20-pounder, comes out of there below El Vado Dam. Okay. And that it fishes. It's real cold water, of course, and it fishes in the summer, but it also fishes all the way. Well, really, any time of the year it could fish, but November is very good because those big browns are moving around to spawn, and and they started a catch and release section there, and it's very long. Just a mile below the dam, it turns roadless, and then it's roadless for 20 miles. But there's not trout for 20 miles because it gets too silty. So perhaps what they do, so perhaps what they do to the dam could help out with that silt factor, which is, you know, when you get streams that are somewhat low in elevation, siltation is a monstrous factor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We were talking about roadless areas and whatnot. Like, how accessible is the river, like up in Colorado and way up in northern New Mexico, as you move down the river? Well, can you get in there?
Yeah. You sure can. you can drive to a campground in Colorado. It's not an official campground. It's mostly for horse people. You see a lot of horse people there.
Yeah.
But you can camp there and you can fish right there, and it's not fish that bad.
Yeah.
And so you can catch fish there, but you can just start and walk a half a mile or a mile. That's easy walking, that Colorado part, actually.
Okay.
And surprisingly, that's easy walking. But if you walk up a couple miles, then you're getting into very lightly fished water. And then there's fishing around Chama. There's a public access, and of course we have the new stream access law.
Yeah, talk about that. That's big.
Yeah, this would be a good time to, because that's one of the areas that is, how can I say, where there's multiple owners, and there's a lot of controversy about that particular area because, well, I better not get into all that, but yeah, the New Mexico Supreme Court just unanimously decided that the anglers can fish up any stream. This is like Montana. Argentina is actually the same way too. And you can fish up any stream. The one thing that has not been tested yet, or nobody's really come out and said, is what is the boundary stream side? Is it high water mark?
Okay.
Is it 30 meters? Is it the water itself? If it's the water itself, if you have to stay in the water, that's going to be a lot of work. And so you follow me? That really hasn't been decided yet. But the Chama area would have quite a bit of that. Where and there's another river there too that I can't believe I forgot to mention, which is the Brazos.
Okay, let me ask you. I want to ask you more about the stream access law, because I think this could have implications in other states. I've read in other states as well. So the landowners were saying, like, nobody can go in this stream that's on my property, and the anglers said, nope, I'm gonna take this to court, and the court said, no, if you access via a public right of way, you can walk up and down that stream. Is that correct?
Well, sort of. The law has actually been on the books forever that the water is all public. But again, the fish department was more fond of landowners than they were of the public, and they proclaimed that you couldn't go on there. Now, since this decision, they put in the new fishing proclamation that the angler has the right to fish up the stream. But they don't go farther than that. They don't tell you what the boundary is, whether it's the bank or 30 meters or whatever. So, but it's pretty much been decided, and it's a big deal. And, I haven't heard any gunshots yet. So,
okay, good.
I lived through it in Argentina. I was taking people fishing in Argentina when this came down there. Same kind of thing. They had it on the books, but it wasn't enforced. And I mean, the part that wasn't enforced was the landowner's favor, right? And so they started allowing fishermen, and I was taking clients to Argentina on that particular year, and it was nervous. I mean, there was guns going off and whatnot, but
really,
that calmed down. Yeah, so just let somebody else get shot at, but it'll work itself out one way or another. Chama, also the Pecos River is going to have a lot of it has a lot of different landowners, and that one will be influenced a lot too. Even the San Juan, quite a few. You don't want to make the mistake of doing that in Colorado, because Colorado is just the opposite.
Right. So, is there a lot of private areas, private water on the Chama as well?
No. I mean, it's probably 10-20% private.
Oh, good.
Not that much.
Okay.
And that's generally the situation in all of New Mexico. I mean, there's so much federal land. It's crazy between BLM and Forest Service. Yeah,
it's awesome. And then you started to mention the Brazos River too. What's that like?
Well, the Brazos comes in right below Chama, and the upper reaches of the Brazos are private. Come to think of it, and that's for miles and miles and miles. However, it goes through a canyon that is very close to impassable. There's a rope in one place where you get up a waterfall, and it's very, very far. It's like 10 miles of extreme going. And then you get out and trout heaven, because the upper parts of it are have some big fish in them. But at any rate, the Brazos is a really nice stream, and it's a good sized stream for New Mexico. It's, I don't know, 40, 50 feet wide.
Okay.
And it's a good dry fly stream. And there are a couple of public access points that are in my book that are handy. They're easy to get at. They're stocked, but they have good wild trout in them too, but they're also stocked. Yeah.
Is the Chama wild trout, does that vary?
Yes.
It is. Okay. It's wild.
You might catch a stalker here and there, but because and this is actually a good thing for listeners to know, because there's a bunch of motels in Chama, and people come there to fish, and a lot of it is just fishing in the back of the motel in a pool and catching stalkers. But they tend to stock fairly good sized fish in that area, 13, 14 inches. And but there's certain times of the year, early summer, there's really big fish that come, well, not really big, but 20 inches, that come out of the lake down below El Vado Lake. And they feed up the river. They follow the hatches up the river, and they can be anywhere. And they're kind of in pods. They're usually browns, but rainbows too. So
nice. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
And how are the reservoirs for fishing?
Well, not good. Not particularly good. The food base is a question mark. Who knows? Somebody put smallmouth in El Vado Lake, and the smallmouth fishing was very good when I haven't done it in a couple of years, but it was real good when I did it. And but the trout fishing has never been very good in that particular lake. There's a lake by Taos, east of Taos, called Eagle Nest. It is a really superb trout fishery, and pike fishery too, and pike.
Oh, interesting.
Very big pike.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a lot of wildlife out there too, right? In your books, you talk a lot about elk. I think you've got some stories about elk, but tell me about the wildlife.
Well, I've got about 15 species in my freezer in the other room.
I'll be right over.
Yeah. Well, elk, of course, like lots. And New Mexico has a unbelievable number of species. There's all of the native ones, and then there's the imports like oryx and ibex, and then there's desert bighorns and mountain bighorns and elk and deer and antelope and bear and lion, turkeys. And they're all here. They're all here.
Man. It's interesting. Is there a story about an elk chasing you and Nick, your son, down a cliff face?
No, there is one story I have. I guess I wrote it somewhere, so you wouldn't know it. But we were up on a cliff once, and I mean, we had to get from the top of that cliff down to the bottom, and it was like 2,000 vertical feet. And we were looking around. Well, how do we get down here? And then I looked down the ground. I said, "Well, this gal knew how to get there, and there's a cow elk track headed down down this impossible slope."
Yeah.
And we followed that track, and it was not her first rodeo, I guarantee it, because she knew exactly how that. We just stayed right in the track. We've never gotten there. Yeah. We'd never have done it without. Yeah. In that same area on the Chama, I was with a guy one time, and we were walking up, and we were above the creek, there was kind of a trail that kind of side hill just above the river. And we looked down and there was a cow elk right down below us. And we kind of snuck up real close to her, 20 feet away or something. She had her butt towards us. And I took a pebble and I threw it down and landed on her. And she kind of looked sheepishly over her shoulder. And then she laid down on the ground.
Huh.
And we walked over there and we sat down right next to her. And we
What?
just sat there and then felt really guilty
Yeah.
about this. Yeah.
What was going on? Why would an elk let you
well,
do that? That sounds insane.
Shock,
Yeah.
you know, I guess. Shock is what is the
Knew
word
she
I
was
heard
beaten.
when I described it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just sat there right next to her. And then we got up and walked away. She was still there. And then
That's
my buddy,
amazing.
when we came back down, because we fished for miles, and we came back down, he walked over there and said she was gone. So you know,
Huh.
we didn't do any lasting damage. We probably educated her on how friendly humans are to elk.
Yeah.
So.
That one might not have made it through the next hunting season. I don't know.
Exactly,
yeah,
right.
The gene pool is, yeah.
Right.
So now grizzly bears, there's no more grizzly bears in New Mexico, correct?
There's no more grizzlies. And if you want to know about the last grizzly in Colorado, it's a great story, which was right there in that country, maybe 20 miles from the upper headwaters of the Chama. A guy was, I think it was in about 1975, something like that.
Yeah.
You can Google it and find it. He was bow hunting for elk, and he got attacked by a female grizzly, and he stabbed it to death with an arrow.
Sure,
and,
why not?
Oh my yeah, well, he was getting eaten, and
yeah.
Nobody believed him. Of course, they figured he just shot it, but he was an outfitter. He was not, like a lawbreaker, and he took a lie detector test and passed the test, and it was a 400-pound. I don't know how old, but they said it was old.
Yeah,
female grizzly, and that's the last one supposedly.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Taylor, I wanted to shift gears for a second. I found this on the Taos Fly Shop website. Now, this is just for all my listeners. We did a show with your son Nick on the Rio Grande last year, maybe the year before. I can't remember. Anyway, but it did really well. Nick did a great job, and Nick now has taken over your fly shop. I believe you sold it to him, right?
Well, yeah, it's his, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. And so anyway, I read this on your web. I thought this was so interesting. I think this is out of your book. It says the prosperity of the fly shop was also limited because the proprietor, known only as Superfly, was an unreliable rapscallion. The gone fishing sign was often in the window, and if you got into the shop, there was another sign suggesting that you make your stay brief. The sign which stated, "You here again? Another half an hour shot." And I was just wondering if you could tell me more about, is that you, Superfly? And what was it like running your fly shop?
Yeah. I think that was me, Superfly.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right.
I have a little taste for the whiskey and beyond in that era of my life. And it was kind of a wild scene. And that story goes on from there, of course. But Taos Fly Shop was quite the scene, and there'd be a bunch of guys hanging around, and one guy pull out a bottle he just stole or something, and so this Navajo woman come by, and she had all these signs for sale, and one of the signs said, "You here again? Another half hour shot." And so I pasted that. Pasted that up to the fly tying desk, and that took care of a couple guys.
That's funny. All right.
But that was that was in the 80s. That was in
the 80s. Okay. Well, I'm curious. Can you kind of take me back to whenever it was that you found your way out to Taos? How did you end up out there, and how did you end up opening a fly shop?
Well, and by the way, we're pitching my next book, which I'm be working on here in a few minutes, which is going to be called "Which Way Is Upstream," and I've got a bunch of chapters done. But I'm quite the perfectionist, unfortunately, when it comes to writing. So it's going to be a while. But yeah, the life in Taos in those days was very different, very, very different. It was kind of a barter life, and my stint in the commune wasn't that long, but then we built an adobe house and we made the bricks ourselves and fought fires and dug trees. I mean, it was different. I was from America, and it was not America. And
Okay.
it's a little more mainstream now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a different thing. In fact, that's part of it. I realize I need this. It's hard to capture in the book how different it was.
Right. I feel like some of that culture is stuck around New Mexico, because I felt like it was still, in a neat way, very different than any place I'd ever been in the United States. I really loved it.
Well, somebody asked me that a little while ago, and in fact, it was an interview, and they asked me, and they said, "What is it about New Mexico?" I said, "Well, it's got a teenage pregnancy, the worst. It's got this, the worst, education, number 49, and this and that. But you ask about anybody, and nobody really wants to leave. It's the money. We're like I think we're behind Arkansas. That's the only state poor, but New Mexico is special. It's different. New Mexico, and one of the reasons it's poor is, I think I put it on that interview. I said, well, money doesn't necessarily come first in New Mexico. It's different.
Interesting. How did you end up opening the fly shop?
Well, I was working at that time. I was surveying and running a surveying crew, actually. And but I fished a lot, and the guy I was working for, he said, you're really not very good at this surveying. We can't read your notes, and so why don't you with what you got going, open a fly shop? And that was a good way of being fired, I guess. I don't know, but I opened this tiny little space, which was when my son reopened in 20 years ago. He actually rented that same space. Now he's in a huge space with I don't know, 24 employees, including guides. But it was a different thing to have a fly shop back then, and then it just turns into a lot of guiding. It turns into a lot of guiding.
Okay.
And then I had some very odd employees. There, Richard, the jazz singer. He was my ace salesman. So my ex-wife who divorced me because she hated fishing. Yeah, right.
Oh man,
yeah, it's all in the book coming out. Be out next year.
Okay.
Which way is upstream? Yeah.
And how did you get into fly fishing? Was that back in the Catskills where you grew up?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I was from the heart of it all in the Catskills. Well, really in the Hudson Valley where I was from, but it was just not an hour's drive over to the Beaver Kill or the Esopus, and I hung out with a couple guys, old guys, my father's age, and they just fished a lot, and they took me, and so we'd go to the Beaver Kill, and then when I was a teenager, I worked for a guy. You'll have some listeners that know this name, named Francis Betters, and he was in the Adirondacks and had a fly shop near Wilmington, New York, on the Osable. And I worked there for 2 years and tied flies for him and guided. I guided Nick Lyons once, and it was so long ago that it was before Nick Lyons was in the book business, and he wrote a letter to the editor in the New York Times that said, I saw Taylor Streit's huge brown trout in his freezer, and And then he said something about when are we going to have catch and release and curtail these monstrous predators from killing these beautiful fish or something like that. But anyway, it was in the New York Times in 1967.
Oh my gosh.
Well, when Nick, he's the one who approved and published my instinctive fly fishing book. And I tried to get him to put that quote on the back of the book, but he thought it was not proper. But
So this is Nick Lyons of Lyons Press, who publishes a lot of fly fishing books, correct?
yeah, well, he's out of it, but yeah, right.
Oh, he is. Okay. Okay. I was also reading about your man versus fish book, which sounds like it's
Yeah.
full of a bunch of really great stories. Something
Yeah.
about people wrestling alligators, something about a 28-inch trout in Patagonia, and a bunch of other things. So talk about that book for a minute.
Yeah, that book is about 20 years ago. It's a hardcover book, and it is mostly fishing stories, but yeah, the Amazon fishing in Argentina a lot, 3 or 4 pieces on Argentina, and mostly New Mexico, of course. And then there's a few hunting stories too.
Okay.
But,
Can you give us one of the stories from the book, one of your favorites? Short version?
Well, probably the best piece in there was I was deer hunting, and it was in the northeast corner of New Mexico. And I was up on this big old volcano of a mountain. And I killed a buck. And it had been raining a lot. And then right after I shot the buck, it was almost dark. And I started dragging the deer down, and then the rain just set in really bad, and it was like 38 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And I got lost and couldn't find the truck. So I stashed the deer, and then I was huddled under a tree till like 1 a.m, and I was shivering so hard, and I didn't have a flashlight. Everything was absolutely soaked, no chance to build a fire. And the country was filled with cliffs. So you'd be walking along in that country, and you'd walk along like a quarter mile, and then it was just sheer off a cliff, you know? So wandering around, how I never had a flashlight, that's pretty amazing, but I didn't. And so in the wind and the rain and freezing to death, and I just started shuffling my feet and walking up, and I looked up. I didn't know which direction I was looking, really. Well, I could see a highway. I didn't know which direction I was looking because I could see the highway, which is about 6-7 miles away. And so I'm going along, and I look over and I see this tiny light. I mean, just the faintness. You had this, shake your head and then look back and look, and yeah, it's a light, all right. And so I started over there, and I'm just shuffling my feet so I don't fall off on these cliffs, And I get over there, and I left the door open, so it was the dome light on my car.
Oh, really?
And
no way. Oh my gosh.
I'd have been...
That's a God thing right there. Boy, I tell you, somebody's looking after you.
And that was, it was so heavy. And, and then I got in there, and I just had the engine running and the heater blasting for hours and hours. And then I found the deer after a lot of looking in the morning. And then I went and got out of there, and I drove to the nearest city, the town, Raton, and
bought a flashlight.
And I got a motel. No, it was daylight. And then I got a motel, and I said to the girl at the motel, I said, "Wow, I just had this incredible thing happen, and I got to go write it down right now." Oh. And so I wrote it down, just so I didn't miss a thing, because I knew I had this incredible story. It almost cost me my life, but it's a good story.
Well, I'm curious, where does this desire to write come from?
Probably reading, I guess,
Okay.
I imagine. But writing's, boy, I got a love-hate thing with writing, that's for sure.
I hear that a lot.
I wrote Yeah, I wrote a chapter a couple of days ago that I just thought was great, and then I thought it was terrible yesterday. So
And you read it again. Yeah. What do you? I mean, love, hate. What do you love, and what do you hate about writing?
I love that it is something to do that is creative and that it satisfies some kind of nerve to create,
Ah, cool.
And what I hate about it is that it's a long time getting to that place, because I don't write magazine things, when you write for a book, you gotta have it right. You gotta have it as good as you can possibly give it, and that's an awful lot of rewriting.
That's a lot of work. No kidding. I hear that a lot. I interviewed Tom Rosenbauer, and his comment was writing's work. He does a lot of work.
It's the hardest, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, I'm curious, Taylor. I mean, all this fly fishing. I'm guessing 50 years or more of fly fishing. What like
More,
life?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
More than 50 years. What life lessons
60, yeah.
can you learn? Can you kind of tell us about from your life and adventures of fly fishing? What are the life lessons there?
Well, it's kept me alive. I think it's not easy anywheres, and it's a great. You need some kind of excuse to be out there doing something, and that's a good one. I still am not. I hang around people that are just naturalists, and they just. They see a bug crawling by and they're just so delighted with that. And, it's okay.
Right. I'd rather tie it up and put it on a hook.
But it really just doesn't do it, completely. Right. So, yeah. So it gives us something to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I want to go back to the Chama. I want to make sure listeners get just a little bit more info on the Chama.
Uh-huh.
Like if you were to head out to the Chama, like what are the, obviously it's season dependent, but what are your top confidence fly patterns that you could tell people about?
Oh, well, I have one that's kind of well known. That's, it's a great fly for a first choice because it's on a big hook. And so fish see it, and if you hook a big fish, you're more likely to land it on that big hook, and it's called a poundmeister.
Yeah.
And it is a cream fly larva. And, usually with a pretty big bead, so it sinks really well. And that's what we use a great deal. And, and we sell those at the fly shop, and the guides always. I don't know if they always use it, but they use it a lot. And
it's a good one.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, I'm a bad person with flies because I've had so much experience with them that I just kind of tie on 2 or 3 flies and I'm done with it. I'm rolling with that for the day. And those 3 flies would be a little hare's ear at the bottom.
Yeah.
And it will be a 3 fly setup in a fairly large river, and with a hare's ear at the bottom as a tail fly.
Yeah.
The poundmeister about a foot to 18 inches above that, and I'm thinking water that's 3 feet deep or something like that, 3-4 feet deep, and then but you change things for the right depth if you're guiding. You go to the extra trouble of changing for different depths. And then so from the poundmeister to the dry fly is maybe another 2.5, 3 feet. So, that would be an average thing for fairly deep water.
Okay.
And the top fly is really important because that is the royal stimulator, which is one of the very few, that huge thing with the red body and the white big cattail wing. And the thing about that particular fly, if it's tied well, and is that it will refloat itself, which is a huge factor. It'll sink and then pop back up to the top.
Okay.
And if you have that happen, then you well, your dry fly floating again, and then you'll know whether you got a fish or not. But
I always think of those stimulators as not being great floaters, but you're saying yours does. Is that because you're like loading up
that particular one has 1, 2, 3, 4 floating aspects to it. It's got the hackle in the front.
Yeah.
It's got a double wing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got palmered hackle through the body. So it has 4 different substances that float. Yeah. So
and the wings are
but
back.
both simulators are not. Yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm.
The wings are laying back, like white,
right?
Like a white, like cat.
Royal
tail.
Stimmy, yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a good one. Any chance you'd be willing to shoot me some pictures of these flies? We get them out so people can take a look at them.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. People love that.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so is the Chama, is it known more as, are you nymphing most of the time, or is it known as a dry fly fishery? It's more nymphing then, huh?
Yeah, it's a good dry fly fishery. A lot of the Chama is pretty shallow, but some of the stretches of the Chama are deep pools, and you got to walk them a long ways in between the pools.
Okay.
And
so look for the pools.
And then you get to the pool, and you might want to run really deep. If the water's deep, I mean, that's how guides work. My guides, which are the best in the world, are we got a mess of them. And the guide level thinking is so much more basic and so much more simplistic than serious amateur fishing. It's in other words, like if you're fishing a shallow river, you can get by with drives, probably just as good or better than anything else. Mm-hmm. And so, and this is the kind of thing that's in my instinctive fly fishing book. And so, like we'll choose flies for totally different reasons than non-professional fishermen would. Right. And it's much more. I've heard Larry Dahlberg talk on this, and he's a serious pro, and he's talking about that people got these ideas about flies for totally the wrong reasons, and
interesting.
It's about how fast the fly sinks. It's about all these different factors that the average fisherman doesn't think of at all.
Doesn't even think of. Right. It probably helps that the guide's out on the water every day.
Like that thing, like the idea with the Royal Stimulator. I mean, everybody's thinking. Nobody thinks of people think of the floatability of that fly, but like I say, that particular fly is one that refloats itself, and that's quite a rarity.
Yeah, so you can shake it out. Those are some great tips. Right. What other tips do you have for folks that are coming out to the Chama? Like maybe what are the top couple things you tell them that maybe we haven't covered already?
Call Taos Fly Shop and get a guide.
Get a guide. That'd be a good one.
Yeah. Well, it's a really good one. And you get a guide and you say, I'm going to fish for a couple more days, and can you give me some advice for afterwards? And then the guide will say, well, I'm going to fish this one stretch probably tomorrow, but turn here or go over there, or so in other words, if you level with the guide, he may level back with you, but you get some good information, and then the guide will know what your capabilities are, right? And so in other words, in that circumstance, the guide's not going to, if you're 90 years old, he's not going to send you down fishing in the gorge in Rio Grande.
Right. Right.
So, we do that a lot. And we just do that. I mean, anyway, the people in the shop are just, in both shops are real helpful, And
for sure.
Just asking a fly shop is real good. And because we're looking at the flow rates all the time, and we usually know just from the flow rate what's happening, how the fishing is in a particular river,
Very good. Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for being on the show. It's really been a
you're
blast.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one more question for you. I'm curious, like if I'm fishing the Chama, are there favorite spots for the hungry, thirsty angler at the end of the day?
The hungry angler at the end
The
of the
hungry,
day?
thirsty angler at the end of the day. Any places you'd recommend in the area that people should go if you're up on the Chama?
Well, the Chama, the town of Chama is not very big, but it does have some restaurants. It's got one called the High Country that I think is I haven't been there in a year now, so I don't know. You know, with pandemic, you don't know what's happened, right? Yeah. So, but the High Country is a good one. Yeah.
Okay, there you go, folks. Well, great. How can people get in touch with you or get in touch with the Fly Shop?
Taos Fly Shop and .com, and and I am Taylor at taosflyshop.com.
Okay, perfect. Okay, there you go, folks.
Yeah.
Drop Taylor a line if you got some questions.
Right.
Yeah.
And like my new book is not. I didn't deal with Mr. Bezos on distributing my book, so it has to go. Yeah, it's from Taos Fly Shop, so we send out a whole lot of them there. So,
well,
if anybody wants that.
Well, you sent me a copy of this a while back. I tell you, it's a really well done book, and it's full, folks, of really good practical information, but also you've heard Taylor today. He's got a really great personality, and that comes through in the book too. Lots of little stories mixed in. But if you want to get dialed in to this part of the world, this northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, southwestern Colorado, man, this is the book for you. This really covers it all. I wish I had this book 4 or 5 years ago when I went out there. This would have really helped me. So great job. Thank you for publishing it.
Yeah, well, and for any writers in your audience, it's that's my 5th book, and I did it all myself. I hired the people, the map maker Pete Chadwell, and I hired Kelly to do the design and whatnot, and then I had it printed myself. Not didn't go through Amazon or anything like that. I just did the whole thing myself. So I don't have the outlets, but we've got the 2 fly shops, and and I do some things like this, and
there you go.
And I'm well known for it because I had another one that sold 40,000 copies. So but
awesome.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing doing the whole thing yourself.
Yeah,
and I get more than 50 cents a copy, which is what you get when you deal with a regular publisher. So.
Oh my gosh, how about that, Taylor? One other question I had for you. In your book, this Taos Santa Fe fly fishing book, you mentioned that you caught 3 fish naked, and I just got to ask you, tell me about that.
Well, they weren't only fish; they were trout, and it was just an incredible day of fishing. And it was on the Chama, and there's a hot springs on the Chama that's on a bank. It's near the Ward Ranch. If anybody is ever close around there, you'll see the Ward Ranch on the map. And there's a hot springs below the Ward Ranch. And there's also, at extremely low flow, I think it was 35 CFS. It was coming out of the dam. This is below El Vado Dam. There's a pool in the river, a hot pool. And I was fishing up, and all of a sudden I'm standing in this hot pool and threw my clothes off, and I'm sitting in there. And of course, the fishing was so good at that very low flow that I had to fish. So yeah, there's your 3 fish naked.
So you were standing in the hot pool and caught fish from the hot pool?
Good. Yeah. Be a good title for a book. Yeah.
Fishing from the hot pool. All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor, listen, I want to wish you extraordinary success in all your ventures to follow. And thank you, folks, for listening. We'll be sure to post Taylor's contact info on the Destination Angler show notes and pictures of his top fly picks on our Facebook and Instagram page. As always, you can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shake50@gmail.com. And hey, you can support the show by spreading the word about the Destination Angler podcast. So please share with your buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.